Have you ever had an idea that makes your heart beat just a little faster, knowing that if it happened, people's lives would change? Professor Helen Bevan, throughout her career, has facilitated and inspired many people to make those changes. And in this episode 11 of Walk and Talk Improvement, we hope you're inspired by Helen's wisdom and insight as you navigate your own work. I'm Juanita Guidera, a Programme Manager in Staff Engagement for Quality with the National Quality and Patient Safety Directorate, and it's a personal privilege to introduce Helen. A leader of large-scale change, an innovator and an activist in health and care, Helen is currently a Professor of Health and Care Improvement at the University of Warwick and a strategic advisor to the NHS Horizons team. She has spent more than 3 decades working in England's National Health Service, focusing on large-scale transformational change, leading and facilitating many improvement initiatives, and through her role as a health and care influencer, reaches more than 1 million people each month. We hope you enjoy this episode of Walk and Talk Improvement. Helen, could you tell us a little bit about how you got started in this work and what spurred your passion for quality and patient safety and change?
I have always been a very creative person, and my father was a sail maker, made sails for ships. So he taught me to sew with a sewing machine when I was 5 years old. And so I always wanted to be a needlework teacher. And
Wow.
And I actually went to university the first time to do textiles, and I hated it because it was all about Bunsen burners and science, and I was this creative little soul. So I went back to higher education and did a degree in social science, and I'd always been interested in people and systems and what makes things tick. So I started a career as a public servant, working in public administration in local government. And just straight away, I got involved in various kinds of change and improvement projects. And I've never really done anything else since. I think it's quite interesting that organizations say they want creative people, and I keep reading these surveys, or I even post them on Twitter that say, what is the number one skill that leaders want for the future? Creativity. But I think it's quite hard being a creative person because you're constantly challenging the status quo, seeing other possibilities and feeling like you never quite fit. So it's kind of creativity and curiosity that got me into quality improvement. So in my 20s, I went to Sheffield Business School. I was working in local government at the time. And one of my professors there, Dave Morris, it was in the 1980s, he was one of the early proponents of total quality management and quality thinking at the time. That MBA changed my life really, because he encouraged me and taught me a whole series of different quality improvement approaches. And I started to bring those into the work that I was doing. And then when I started in the NHS in 1991, I was on a scheme for people who had the potential to be future chief execs of the NHS, within a 5-year timescale. And I never became a chief exec because as soon as people found out that I had quality improvement skills and enthusiasm, I started doing that. And 30 years later, I'm still doing the same. So I can't say it was a choice, but working in public service was a choice, and public service values are really important to me. Being curious and creative and working in improvement gives the opportunity of all those things. Yeah, I've never had a definite career plan. I've just done work I love. And then because I'm curious, I've done quite a lot of other things. So I did a doctorate part-time, and I read and find out about things vociferously and bring those into my work. But I think who I am as a person in the world and the things that motivate me, being a leader of large scale change and quality improvement, it's been my dream job for 30 years.
Wow. Okay. There's so much in that before we even start. There's something about creativity, and in particular, when you are in that creative mode, that vision that you have for the end result. and being able to adapt that and change that as something emerges from your work. Do you think that's something that you've applied? Obviously, the approaches around quality improvement are different or defined in some ways, but do you think that you've brought that creativity into your work?
What I think, one of the things I'm good at is I've never been defined by one methodology or one way of seeing things. So, yeah, I'm a bit of a kind of methodological polymath, in a sense that what tends to happen is people tend to be specialists in one area or one approach and, know that approach really well. And I've had various times in my life when I've focused on a particular methodology, but I've never been contained by it. So, people tend to be like a quality improvement person or an OD, organizational development person, but like I'm both. And, I like a bit of critical theory, social movement thinking, design thinking, systems thinking. So, yeah, I think one of the things I've been able to do is to work with a lot of different approaches and see things differently. And yeah, being visionary is kind of part of that. But I think what I've had an ability to do is like work out what the next thing is going to be in advance of other people. Because like I have my ear to the ground all the time. I'm kind of, well aware of what we're talking about, connected with a lot of people around the world around what are people thinking, what are people doing, what's the latest research that's being published. So it's not even about like being a visionary. It's just being somebody who's well connected and curious and always learning. So getting excited about new things all the time, but not just new things for the sake of it. So like, yeah, I read a lot of research, but I'm not interested in research for the sake of research. I'm only interested in research that actually makes a difference practically. So all the things I'm interested in are all applied things.
Yeah, I'm conscious you've changed roles in recent times. You might tell us a little bit about that. And the bit that strikes me in that is that balance between the theory and the practical applications, and how that sits in with it. Because very often we look to the theory, but really it's the practice where we get our most of our learning comes from.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we can think about explicit and tacit knowledge. So explicit knowledge is the kind of knowledge that has been published in a research journal or a best practice toolkit or a quality standard. And then tacit knowledge is the kind of knowledge, the kind of practical know-how that people use every day, like learn how to do things and make things work in a given situation. And history shows us that the really big innovations and breakthroughs come from tacit knowledge, not explicit knowledge. And in a sense, I'm a very tacit knowledge person because, I'm interested in practical know-how and making things happen. And one of the problems that we've got is that practitioners like us are so busy being doers and loving being doers and make a difference in the world that even though we're really well intentioned around, want to develop more theory and more explicit knowledge, we're just too busy being doers because that's what excites us in the world, that we don't have enough time and energy and space to write it up properly.
Sit down. Yeah. That sounds so familiar. I'm sure there's lots of things you've done over the years that have said, gosh, if I'd written that up, that's the book that I'm reading on the shelf there now,
I know. It's happened to me 100 times.
One of the things I suppose about doing as well is that sense of, as somebody describes it, the pain that can come from doing things. Do you think you can have successful quality improvement work or OD work without a degree of pain or challenge on a personal level or with a group?
I think it's part of the territory, right? Nobody ever becomes like a change leader or an improvement leader for an easy life because, you're constantly challenging the system, the status quo, wanting people to do things differently. And very often, like in your enthusiasm, not doing it very well either. So cheesing people off. No, it's not an easy life at all. But I think that there's things that you can do that make it easy. So, I've spent most of my life as a change agent inside a big system, inside the National Health Service in England. And there's a joy and a pain to that. So the joy is, just getting to work with hundreds, thousands of amazing people. And when it goes well, being able to help make change happen across a big system. And the pain comes because priorities change all the time. People change. So, you had a sponsor or a leader that was really passionate about the work that you were doing and that you put lots of effort and energy into, and then that person goes. Political cycles are very short term. So, yeah, the short termism can be very frustrating, and leaders who want to see results very quickly. And the nature of the change that we're doing means that very often the change can't happen quickly. So, yeah, you need a tin hat in this job. I'd say a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But like one of the things I've learned over the years is just like I've had some fantastic senior leaders in the system, and they really look after me and they really protected me. And my ability, like the ability of a lot of people who work in change and improvement, to some extent depends on having a really good line manager who believes in you and supports you and enables you. And I've had that a lot. It's been fantastic, like really like watching my back and the back of other people. And I try to be that person too, but that doesn't always happen. So actually building really strong social connections with other people and being part of a strong peer group, I think has been really important too.
Yeah, and that's something I was going to ask you about. Do you have a few people around you that you can bounce things off in a sort of a safe way, or that sort of sustains you when it does get tough, or when it's going well?
Yeah. I've got people that I talk to all the time. We have regular scheduled sessions where we talk to each other. We have WhatsApp groups. You have to have that. And again, history shows us that the people in the world that deliver large-scale change, they're not necessarily very senior leaders. They're not necessarily frontline people. They're groups of people with a common purpose, loosely connected, coming together. And I see that all the time.
My thinking around our conversation today was, do you think that you've learned more from the things you failed at or succeeded at? And if you were to think about your greatest personal learning from the work that you've done, what has it been?
Yeah. So I think, Juanita, it depends on how you define failure.
Yeah.
Because I think that you have to have failure, because if you're an improver, you're trying new things out all the time. Plan, do, study, act, tests and other things. And you have to have failure, because all the time you're going into unknown territory and you don't know what's going to work, what's not going to work. So like Amy Edmondson has got a new book out now called The Right Side of Wrong. And that's all about what she calls intelligent failure. And, you're never going to move forward as an organizational system without having intelligent failure. So loads of things that I've done have failed, and I think that's a good thing. So there's that kind of failure, which is like experimentation. Let's try this out. Is it going to work? Let's learn from it and move on. Is one kind of failure. Another kind of failure is where you're working on some big program that you're really excited about. It doesn't work, or something goes disastrously wrong. Yeah, I've had a few of those as well. Yeah. It's interesting. Do you know, when I think about it, okay, like when I think about my biggest big failures, as opposed to intelligent failures, which are good, my biggest big failures all have a kind of pattern. So you'd think I'd stop doing it. My big failure pattern is, so like, I love method, like a lot of quality improvement people. I always want us to do improvement work in a systematic way, following a method, and different kinds of methods for different contexts. Very often where it's gone wrong for me is leading with method rather than leading with an aim. So like one of the really biggest failures, well, not a failure, like where something went wrong, because it actually got, as long as you take the learning from it, I think it's okay. So I was working on a big national clinical improvement program using collaborative methodology. We got an external team to come and help us, and they were like amazing, the external improvement experts. And we were so excited to be working with these people, because they were like the best people in the world. And we put this program together and we organized our first learning event. And we had about 150 people come into this first learning event. And a lot of them, maybe 100 of them, were medics. We made a really big mistake of focusing on the methodology and naming it by the methodology and not focused on the aim. And what happened was a lot of these clinicians revolted. They didn't want to talk about methodology. They wanted to talk about aim for their patients. And it was a disaster. And they walked out and they read newspapers. And I can remember going into the bathroom, and one of the facilitators was in there crying, and it was awful. But we kind of learned and turned it around, and it was fine. Recently, I've been working on a national project in England, and it's called Stay and Thrive. And it's about supporting internationally educated clinicians, mostly nurses, to be retained in the NHS. And we're using a particular methodology for this called positive deviance. And positive deviance methodology means finding, in terms of what would good retention practice, finding the places that are doing it really well, and let's find out what their practice is and let's copy that. So, and it's been a fantastic project actually, but we're really, really clear. Like, we never mention that it's a positive deviance project, because once you start leading with the methodology, you lose it. So, we're really clear. The aim of this is to support internationally educated colleagues to want to stay in the NHS and have a thriving career in the NHS. It's not the positive deviance project. So leading with methodology, big mistake. Don't do it.
No, I've done it. I've done it. As you're talking there, we're like, oh my gosh, yeah. And I can see it myself. And now, like, there's certain things that I know, if we're doing something, the people that are interested in the methodology will come up to you afterwards and say, gosh, I really liked how you did that. But the getting to that point is actually, when you start off with it, this is how we're going to do it. I've lost people. And I think definitely for me, the things that I've probably learned most from in my career have those things that I've failed at, or the projects that I've been part of that have failed spectacularly, and I've had the most learning from them. So
definitely.
Really, is it just me, or is it broader? So that's good to know. One of the things that you talked about there was being uncomfortable with the unknown, and I know with a lot of the work that we've done, in conversations about being comfortable with the unknown, people have sort of linked it in their heads to that sense of, I won't be seen as professional. Is there advice that you could give people with sort of that connection in their minds between being unprofessional, that it's not necessarily unprofessional to be uncomfortable with the unknown? Yeah.
Well, first of all, we have to be uncomfortable with the unknown. And again, it goes back to the whole idea about intelligent failure, because, you may have something like a practice or a pathway that's worked great in a different context, like in a different clinical setting or in a different delivery organization, but you don't know if it's going to work in your organization. So, you have to do it. And Paul Bertolden, quality improvement guru, says all of us do two jobs in healthcare. One job is to do our clinical role, or whatever kind of role it is, and the other is to constantly improve our services. So, those of us that are in leadership roles, it's our job to support our colleagues and our teams with the discomfort of new things. And I think there's loads that we can do to make a difference, or to alleviate that. So, like, one thing we can do is, when we're trying new things out, to just try it in a really small way. Like, let's just try this with one patient or two patients in a really controlled and safe way. But I do think, as leaders, we set the climate, and like, we have to be the people that are role modeling discomfort and role modeling, trying new things. So, if you said, oh, we're going to introduce this new service on Monday without trying it out at all and just set it up for a load of patients, well, I don't think that's professional either, because you haven't tested it and you don't know if it's going to work or not. But having really excellent systems and support mechanisms for intelligent failure, is really professional, and it should be everybody's job.
Yes. Yeah. You touched on it there, that engagement piece. If you're thinking of engagement with patients and staff, how important do you think that engagement is for a quality and safe culture?
I think that engagement is the heart of quality improvement. And what's happening globally now is people are starting to recognize that we should see relationships as an outcome in their own right, because it's so important. And the evidence is really, really clear So, for instance, we had a very interesting experiment in the NHS in England, where 5 NHS organisations were supported by the NHS nationally to implement whole system quality improvement, and they all got the same inputs. So, and it was about introducing a lean-based whole organisation approach to improvement. And all 5 NHS hospital systems all got given the same resources. They all got the external coaching. They were all in a learning set together. And of the 5, like 3 went forward in their performance and 2 went back. And the evaluators from Warwick Business School, where I work, they looked at what was the difference between the 3, over 5 years, the 3 organisations that went forward in their performance and the 2 that went back. And the only really major difference that they could see was about relationships and connections. And those organisations that had built, a strong level of cultural readiness and strong trusting relationships moved forward and better, and their performance improved much more than the places that hadn't done that. So, the reality is that you cannot do change to people or for people, really. You've got to do change with or by people. And I think, again, in health and care systems, I think one of the biggest problems that we see is, with a really good intention, we do change for people. So like as a leader, I'm making all this change happen. I really, really care about my team and I want great outcomes. And, it's almost like parochial. We're doing change for people. Actually, when we do change with people, or we actually support people to do it for themselves, the outcomes are nearly always inevitably better. So we just have to get much, much better at not just engaging people in change, making change a co-owned collaborative activity.
So in the health system here at the moment, there's obviously a lot of change happening structurally at national level, at local level. And if you think of those leaders, that Paul Batalden piece about continuing to do the job while introducing this new piece of change and doing my quality improvement work or change work or whatever it is, and there is that different reform program there, what advice would you give to leaders of teams if you're thinking about building those relationships, on a very fundamental level and engagement? What advice would you give them?
I would say to work in the way that is the way for the future. And again, it's kind of tricky when there's changes going on and you have to judge it for yourself, to find changes that are in line with how things are going to be going forward. And if things are very fluid and we don't quite know what's going to happen because of restructuring, on one level, it's a really good time because, things are very open to different possibilities. And if you can test out and show some different ways of doing things, it's often the best time. Sometimes it can be the worst time because everything is so fluid. It's like trying to do improvement work on foundations of sand. So you have to work it out for yourself, really. If you've got a really good line manager, have a chat with them to say, what improvement work should we be doing now that's going to help to create that different future? Or make your own judgment about things that you think should happen differently and get on with it anyway. Just make a judgment that it is going to be viable going forward rather than something that's going to disappear in the restructure. Find the other people that want to do the same change that you want to do and, run some experiments. A lot of the time people are anxious, I haven't got permission or the power to do this. And yet very often when you talk to the line managers of the people that are saying that, rather than being cross, why are you doing this? You haven't got permission or power to do it. Actually, the line managers are really pleased. People are showing initiative. Yeah, I'm looking for stuff all the time. A lot of the time, I don't ask for permission. Just go and try a few things out. What you can't be is like a bull in a china shop going round creating havoc. But what you can do is, try some things out, make a difference. And again, if you look at people in health and care improvement who are the best disruptors, the best disruptors aren't the people who are going around creating havoc, challenging the status quo. Actually, the best disruptors are the people that have built deep and trusting relationships with other people, and they're working through and with the system, not against it. like I've spent my whole career, standing up for things and not always asking for permission, well, mostly not asking for permission. But I have a shared purpose with very senior leaders in the NHS. And, we want the same things. So everything I ever do in the system is about understanding what the priorities are and moving things in the right direction. So I think all of us can do that.
What about those scenarios where maybe you don't have a shared purpose? That there's I don't want to say a block in the system.
Yeah, blocks are everywhere. But you know what? Are they really blocks? Often like somebody will come up with a good idea and they think, I have to do a business case, like to the senior leadership team. I mean, I'd probably advise them not to do a business case, not to start with. I'd advise them to find some other people that are interested in the same stuff you're interested in and try it out. And if your particular part of the organizational system has got somebody who's blocking, well, the other people that you're collaborating with actually might have more support or some clearer channels. So help them to do it. We have to see the bigger picture on this, but never wait until the block gets removed or somebody leaves or changes their mind, because you'll be waiting forever. There's too much to do. There's too much care that's unsafe and patients are getting a really bad experience. So I think a lot of it is tactical as well. Find the other people to work with and help them to make the changes, because if they can show that the change is beneficial, then you're in a much stronger position with the people that are blocking you because someone else has already done it.
And that's really useful advice for working within hierarchy, because certainly within healthcare, there is a huge hierarchy, and it can seem sometimes like that control and command is, going to inhibit everything that you might want to change or do. One of the things that I've come across is that people feeling that the system doesn't facilitate engagement, or there's a perception that we don't have permission, or that sense of learned helplessness. But I think sometimes there's a lot more control that we actually do have.
Yeah, I completely agree.
If you were thinking about that, how do you think people can overcome those challenges, those mental blocks, real or imagined, that they might put in their own way?
So I think we're all complicit in the system, and I am too. We just get into this real parent-child mentality. And once you're in a child role, you play it out, you play your part. I think we have to break out of that. So again, I think it's the same advice. Find some other people that want to do the same things that you want to do. Build a support system, build strong relationships, and just start trying things out in a small way. And then the other thing I'd say is go and talk to your line manager. So I think as improvement people, very often, we need to get much better at managing upwards. And, we make all sorts of assumptions about what we've got permission on or not. And in the same way we talk about compassionate leadership and empathy, well, we need to apply that to our line managers as well. So if somebody's like blocking you and saying no, like, why are they saying no? Spend some time getting to know your line manager and like why they're saying the things that they're saying, and like what matters to them, and talk to them about your goals and dreams and the things that you'd like to do differently, and you might be amazed.
That's really, really helpful advice. If I was to ask you, I look at, say, your social media, you've over nearly 136,000 people follow you on Twitter, you've over 1 million engagements a week. If you're thinking of the skills that you had naturally, what is it about the message that you have that you think resonates with people?
So firstly, I've been doing it a long time. So I haven't had, suddenly a big spike and loads of new followers. So yeah, social media is like anything. You have to work at it and you have to do it consistently. So I've never had big spikes in sudden followership. I just do Twitter nearly every day, and I like doing it. I like the discipline of having to find things out. And yeah, I just keep doing it consistently. And also it's great to find out what people like and what they don't like. So I started doing graphics quite early, because what I found is that when I put a graphic on a tweet, I get like 10 times as many responses to it than if I just put a tweet out. So yeah, I think there's certain things I'm good at. I'm good at thinking creatively. I like graphics. I'm interested in a lot of different things related to change and improvement and leadership of change. So, before I used to tweet, I used to maybe read or look at about 100 things a day. So wow. A lot of the things that I was doing for Twitter, I was doing anyway, but just for me. So I just kind of turned what I was doing anyway into a public facing thing. Yeah, it's kind of knowing what people want and doing it, but it's also what I want as well, because it fulfills, something I'm doing, just like looking for new stuff all the time, new content. And I use the things that I find out. I mean, I use them every day. Got new content coming out the whole time. So when Amy Edmondson is publishing a new book on intelligent failure, I know about it like a long time in advance because I'm following what she's doing. So it means that my practice and my content is always fresh. Do I have special skills? I think just persistence, really, and having a hard skin, because, sometimes it's not all kind of bells and roses or whatever on Twitter. And, there's quite a lot of people about at the moment who are angry and upset. It's a platform that people respond on negatively. And, it's about being quite resilient. And it's about having lots of friends on Twitter as well who send you good stuff and look after you. So the people on Twitter are a really big part of my support system as well.
It's really good to hear. You talked about things being hard at times. If I was to ask you about balance in your work and what brings you joy, and I've seen you tweeting about jazz or about cats, think about that. Like, do you find your hobbies or interests in your personal life fuel that creativity that motivates you in your work?
I am in my private life how I am in my work life, in a sense that I like finding things out. I read a lot. I'm a textile artist, and that's my creativity. So I think my private life is pretty parallel to my work life. But one thing is I went on this women's leadership weekend, and the facilitator made us all talk about all the things that we loved doing when we were kids, and the things that brought us joy as children and young women, and compare that to our lives now. And I was probably the only person in the group that every single thing that I loved doing and brought me joy when I was a kid, I still do every one of those things now. So my life has been utterly consistent. And again, things like work-life balance, I don't know if it's a good term really, in the sense that for me, there isn't something called work and something called life that needs balance, because work's a big part of my life. It's who I am. It's my identity. So I don't think I can separate work from life. And I think, some people need really clear boundaries between things. And I respect that. I think my boundaries are less clear. And I think that's okay. And I'm happy. I think I wouldn't recommend my life
working
to everybody, probably, but I like it.
That's the only thing that matters, I think, when it comes to your own life, is whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
And I do think that there's something about that boundary. I think sometimes when you're in this space, it's very hard to switch it off. I could be watching a television program and there'll be something in it and I say, God, that's a really good teaching example.
I know.
Or I might be able to use that somewhere else. And you can't.
I do that all the time.
I suppose the standard question that you always hear in these things is that if you were starting again, what advice would you give to yourself about this work? Do you have something that comes up for you that you say, gosh, yeah, that's something I'd have loved to have known 20 years ago or 30 years ago or whatever it is?
I would probably say to maybe have more confidence, to push forward even more. And sometimes, I get worried about what other people think of me, because lots of senior people don't see the value of the kind of stuff I do. And I expect to get a lot of pushback. And I guess if I had my time again, I wouldn't worry about that so much. I just get on with it. And again, things that when you're 25 seem like the biggest deal in the world, when you're 60, doesn't matter. That wasn't a big deal. I've even forgot about it. And yet at the time, it just was completely overwhelming in my life.
Yes.
So not to be so worried about what other people were going to think, or concerned that other people might not like me or what I was doing. I wouldn't care about it as much, or I wouldn't let that affect what I do.
Yeah. I got a really good piece of advice years ago from somebody that told me what other people think of you is none of your business.
Yeah.
And I thought it's a really good phrase.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you have a personal mantra or a book or a resource that you go to sort of time and time again?
No.
No.
No, not really. Do you know, it's interesting because like some people love quotes and mantras, but like I'm off busy finding the next one. You know, like
Yeah.
yeah, I am reflective, but I like new ideas and new ways of doing things. There's certain like models or ways of thinking that I really love and will use absolutely time and time again, like the stages of change, a trans-theoretical change model, and obviously the classic improvement, model for improvement, the IHI principles. Always come back and use those. But I tend to be like looking ahead all the time and finding new ideas. So I'm more reflecting on new things than I am going back to like wise quotes.
Yes, yeah, you're writing the wise quotes. And is there any techniques that you found have worked really well for facilitating groups or conversations with groups to build those relationships?
Yeah. So because I've done this national job in the NHS for a long time, I got a lot of opportunities to watch the big consultancies facilitating, and I learned an awful lot from them. So I never formally went to school for it. I just was in lots of environments where I learned about it, and then I went off and learned more myself. So some of the methodologies have been really impactful to me. So like one methodology that I learned is called MG Taylor methodology for large group engagement, and it's based on how you bring groups of people together for like a day or 2 days or 3 days. You can do as much work in one day of complex problem solving that might take you 6 weeks or 8 weeks using conventional techniques. So I love MG Taylor methodology and I use it in so much of my work. Liberating structures I love as well. And if people listening to this podcast, if you don't use liberating structures in your facilitation, your change facilitation or improvement facilitation, then you should, because they're brilliant. And I think there's 42 of them, and they're like different techniques that you can use with a group for problem solving. And you don't need to be a skilled facilitator. Anybody can work with liberating structures. So I'd say those are the main ones. I learn from all over the place. So working with design sprint methodology, I use that quite a lot in facilitation, appreciative inquiry, just lots of different kinds of approaches, and just mix them up all the time. But it depends on like what the aim is really and the nature of the problem. So yeah, I use a lot of different techniques and approaches, and I love watching other people facilitate. It's such a joy, and any excuse I get to watch and learn from someone else, I will take it. So I'll go and sit in on people's webinars because I just want to watch how they do it and I want to learn. And then I do a lot of coaching with other people around facilitation and complex problem solving. So I think I'm at a kind of age and stage where my job is about legacy and about helping the next generation. And it brings me such joy. So I've been, working with some of the Horizons team recently, and we've been looking at transformational scenario planning. We've been looking at 3 Horizons workshops. Yeah, I've really, really loved doing that with the team.
Thank you for your time today. And this will be a part of that legacy, I'm hoping, because it's been a fantastic opportunity to talk to you from my perspective in particular. Such a joy because I followed you for so long on Twitter and I had the pleasure of meeting you earlier this year. But I just want to say thank you for your time. And is there anything that I should have asked you that I didn't ask, or anything that you'd like to add?
No, it's been a very nice conversation, Juanita, and you made me reflect on things I haven't reflected on before. So thank you. Yeah, I enjoyed it.
Thanks very much. As we come to the end of episode 11 of Walk and Talk Improvement, we thank Professor Helen Bevan for sharing such a rich and honest insight into her work and life, and in doing so, inspiring us. Engaging patients and staff to improve patient safety are commitments 1 and 2 of the patient safety strategy. And as Helen affirmed, engagement is the heart of building a culture of quality and patient safety. And central to this is building deep and trusting relationships with people. We hope this podcast encourages you in your own work and that it may ignite or sustain your creativity, curiosity, and passion for improving quality and patient safety. Thank you for listening to Walk and Talk Improvement.